Today, we're going to be looking at the best settings for Krunker in 2021. These settings aim to give you the most amount of FPS possible, but also give you a competitive edge against your enemies. By the end of this video, I'm hoping that you will get anywhere from 10 FPS up to 100 FPS extra from your system. If you like the video, if it helped you out a lot, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and it lets you know when the next video is coming up. Without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, now we're going to jump straight into the settings section. We're going to start from general. Now you can play around with these default settings up here. You've got some pro settings, some performance settings, and the default settings as well in Krunker. Typically people try and just go for performance, and if that doesn't work for them, they kind of just give up, and that's the end of it. Today we're going to dive in and find exactly what gives you FPS and what doesn't. There's quite a few settings in Krunker, quite a few pages to go through. So I'm going to try and be as in-depth as possible to make sure you understand what you're changing and understand if you're going to get an FPS gain or if you're going to get a competitive advantage by changing that setting. So before we start looking into our settings here, I just need to show you exactly how you can import settings, because I will leave a link to these settings below in the description so that you can automatically load them in and see how you go. So if you want to load someone else's settings into your Krunker to play around with them, all you got to do is click this import tab. What you do there is you paste the entire text from the settings document that you received or the copy paste from the settings website that you got them from and put it entirely into here. It's gonna look like a lot of mumbo jumbo. It's gonna look like another language, but trust me, it goes in here and you just click submit and you'll see your game start to update. If we start up in default region and language, these are some pretty standard stuff. It's all personal. Play whatever region's closest to you. I play in the Sydney region because I live in Sydney. You can see by the 3 ping up there that I basically live inside of the Sydney server. And language, I chose English because I speak English. And if you're listening to this video, good chance you're going to choose English too. Down here in network, lag compensation. That is going to change for you dependent on what server you're playing in. So if I play, for example, in the US servers, I put my lag comp on 1. It helps me aim better because it compensates for the lag that I have communicating with that server. It makes my shots more accurate. In the reverse, if you're using it in your native servers, keep it off. It's going to make it harder for you to aim if you're closer to the server you're playing on. Typically, if I'm below 70 to 100 ping, I will keep it off. And if I'm above 70 ping, I will keep it on. Play around with the amounts. Not everyone has the same distance, obviously. Hit reg test and auto routing, keep those off. For auto routing, I found that I was getting some crazy ping, but also some crazy stutters in the game as well. The game would just not respond. Down here, server browser, legacy browser I've turned on. It's up to you. That's a personal preference. It's not going to affect your FPS. And default region I keep off as well, so I can join whatever region I feel like. Pop-ups with show free KR pop-up. You might want to turn that off, but I keep it on so that I can take advantage of any free KR pop-ups that do come my way, because free KR, who's gonna say no to that? Down here in experimental, I don't play with these at all. Typically 9 times out of 10, I'm getting worse FPS when I turn these on because these are untested, unfinished options in the game. I might urge you to test it for yourself because I do believe every computer responds differently to these settings. We have controls over here. Now, these don't affect your FPS, but they might affect your competitive gameplay. Let's move over to display. Now with display, your UI scale, I have mine set at the lowest, 0.1. If you're wondering what UI scale does, it changes the size of everything here. So if we jump up to 1, everything gets real chunky. Everything takes up a lot of your screen. You've got a lot of overlapping happening here. I've got my settings menu here on top of my Krunker logo on top of my server region. It's messy, it's ugly, I don't like it. I think by default Krunker sits close to 1. To turn it down, a lot of people sit at about 0.3, 0.4. It's still a good size. Next up is show UI. This just shows you everything basically while you're playing the game outside of the menu. Your leaderboards, your health, your experience, your chat box, whatever it might be. Keep it on. It's going to help you more than hinder you. Old scoreboard is just a personal preference. Disable rarity animations. I would turn that on so you do disable them. It's sort of a tricky way that they worded it. You want to look at your computer like this. It is thinking up of the image before it gives it to you. The harder your computer has to think, the longer it takes to make that image and give it to you, which means you're getting less frames every second. But the easier the image is for your computer to think and make and give to you, the more it can create in a second. When you've got more animations, more textures, more objects loading in a scene or a setting on your screen, your computer's thinking harder, it is dropping frames, and it's taking longer to send that information to you. Coming down to further, I would really urge you to play around with the colors of everything. Damage color, crit color, all that kind of stuff. The brighter you make it, the easier it is for you to see in your game. I wouldn't make it just plain white because of maps like Sub-Zero where that would just blend into the ground depending on the angle that you're looking at. So go for some bright colors that aren't seen a lot. Stuff like yellow, green, red, pink, cyan, even bright purple. Show ping in FPS, I would say keep that on. That way you know what your FPS is at, so you can know whether these settings are working for you. And ping just lets you know whether it's the game lagging or your internet connection lagging. Movement speed and all of this that's associated with movement speed, I just would keep it off. I don't see the need. You're not going for the world record for Krunker speed running. XP bar down the bottom, a lot of people seem to turn that off, but I keep mine on because I like to know exactly how far I am from the next level. I'm level 141 right now, and the XP bar is pretty far before I get to 142. With the chat box here, again, it's not really going to change your FPS. It does take out some screen real estate down the bottom left here, depending on your UI scale. That'll change in size, but I keep mine on and I keep my profanity filter off. This isn't a competitive or an FPS advantage, but you might want to put that profanity filter on if you're seeing a lot of bad messages. The play base does have a pretty short fuse sometimes. They can say some pretty nasty and hurtful things, especially if you're young and you have parents or guardians walking around snooping over your shoulder. Moving on from chat, we have our crosshair. I use a custom crosshair. Now, if you have a look at my crosshair in game, it's very small and it's very precise. It goes right to the middle of the screen, which means even when I'm not ADSing, I'm able to tell what's going on and I'm able to tell where I'm going to be aiming at. So if someone's coming around the corner, I can pre-aim before I go down my sights, aim in, shoot them, aim back out. They're gone, and I've just gotten myself a few extra bonus points via a quickscope because I spent less time looking down my sights. I use a custom image that I picked up a long time ago from a random Krunker server. I'm going to leave the link in the description below. If you want this specific crosshair, I have to leave it on my Twitch. YouTube doesn't like it when I put additional links. So go to twitch.tv/heyimzed into my chat and type !crosshair. It'll pop up with the link. You just copy, change your type of crosshair to image and paste it right in there. Mine's a Discord link, so you know any link pretty much works, but it'll be the exact same link that I use, so you know it's gonna work. Now we have hit markers to talk about. I keep mine on and I have my color white and kill color red. You can change these to whatever you like. I find white might not be the best color, especially like I said for maps like Sub-Zero, but typically I don't really care about it. I know I've been playing Krunker for long enough, so I know if I'm hitting someone or not. This isn't one that helps me a lot, but if you're playing on low resolution, if your game's a bit pixely, it might help you decipher if you've hit someone or if you've just shot a tree. Okay, next up, we have one of the most important settings in Krunker. This setting directly impacts your FPS, I find, the most out of any setting. Let's have a look right now. My resolution here is at 2, and my FPS when I'm actually loaded into a round is sitting at 700. But if we go back into resolution, let's have a look at the difference going from 2 to 1 megs. So if you have a look at my FPS now, it is sitting at the low end now of 760 and peaks all the way up to 790. This has given us a massive FPS increase of 20 to 30 FPS on average. We take this to the extreme and we move our resolution down to 0.5. The game becomes hard to see. It's very blurry. It's very pixelated. You might not be able to discern whether it's a box, plant, whatever it might be. And the FPS on at least my PC hasn't changed too much. We take this to the extreme now and go to 0.1. The game, in my opinion, is unplayable. If your computer is an absolute potato from the Soviet era, you might want to put it down to 0.1. For most people, man, 2 works. So just play around with it. You'll find something that works for you, but go in increments. I would say 2 to 1 to 0.5. If you can't get anything working between those 3, mow some lawns, get a better PC. You're just not ready for Krunker, I guess. Going through the rest of these settings here, we have frame cap. This just caps your frame limit. Right now in the menus, I get sort of a low FPS because it's loading a lot of different things that change. We're sitting at about 300 FPS. If I put my frame cap up to 40, my frames will now not go above 40. My aspect ratio is 1656 by 1080, and it does give me an FPS increase. More importantly than that, it gives me a stretched resolution, which I find gives me a competitive advantage whenever I'm looking around at people on my screen. For some reason, it just feels easier to aim in stretch res rather than regular res. These are some things you want to keep off, by the way. Anti-aliasing, keep that off. Map details, keep that off. And particles, keep those 3 off. If you want to maximize your FPS, those 3 things chew into your FPS. Low spec and no textures, you might want to turn on if you're really, really struggling. Your game is gonna look worse. It's not going to be pretty, but it'll run and it'll run better. Coming down here to reflection quality, you could change that down to 32, 64, or 128. Those are your lower end options. I keep it map dependent, so it changes from map to map, but reflections are a big one that will eat your FPS, along with shadows. So with shadows, you might want to turn all of them off. Keep regular shadows off, keep soft shadows off, keep high res shadows off, and keep dynamic shadows off. I'm seeing a 40 to 100 FPS drop whenever I keep these on. Bullet trails and my trails, I keep these on. Bullet trails is stuff like that. You can see my bullet go straight down the middle there. I'm gonna shoot again. I find it helps me out a lot, especially if I'm no-scoping or using a gun like the SMG to play long range. That kind of stuff lets you know whether your spread's too far, if your no-scopes are on point, whatever it may be. You're keeping track of your bullets as they come out of your gun. Definitely keep those on. They're not going to make a whole lot of difference to your FPS. You might see 1 to 3 FPS change. So keep them on. I think it's more of a competitive advantage in that end. Muzzle Flash, you can turn that off. I would say you're probably getting a competitive advantage by turning it off because it's less animation on your screen, less of your screen real estate is being taken up by something that doesn't need to be there. Next up, we have Show Sniper Flap and Sniper Flap Animation. These do eat your FPS. I've seen people from 10 to 30 FPS get changed by keeping these on or off. So next up is texture and object animations. Going back to what I said earlier, the less your computer has to think, the quicker it can give you the image. So by having texture, by having object animations, that is more for your computer to think. It's more time it needs to take to think. So it's going to take longer for you to receive that image. You're going to get less images per second, which means your FPS is going to drop. Screen shake, I would keep off. It's when an RPG shoots like right next to you and your screen shakes. That just seems really annoying to me. It makes it harder to aim in the middle of a firefight when someone shoots an RPG at me and my whole screen goes wild, crazy. It's chaos, it's bedlam. So keep it off if you want to stay a bit more competitive there and just shrug off those RPGs. They're still gonna hurt, but they're not gonna ruin your visual aesthetic at least. Lighting, you're gonna want to keep that low for maximum FPS. I keep it at physical. It looks nice. It feels nice for my videos. Anything above 500 FPS, I feel like it's a negligible return. I'm not seeing a lot of difference there for my videos and for my streams. So I keep it on and play around with a few things. But if you're not streaming, if you're not content creating, just want maximum FPS for the best gameplay possible, keep it on low. Show explosions, I keep that off. That is when like an RPG shoots you and all the smoke goes everywhere. Coming down to post-processing, turn it off, turn bloom off, and turn SSA off. All of those things will make your game look prettier, but that means your computer's thinking harder and you're getting less frames per second. So keep them all off. We don't care about a pretty game right now. We care about FPS and competitive advantage. Editing wise, I'm not going to go through each one of these. There's a lot of options here. These will help you customize your game, make things stand out more or less for you while you're playing the game. Coming down further, speed lines, I would keep speed lines off. I have mine set at 0. This just essentially means when you're hopping around the map, slide hopping, lets you know whether you're going fast or slow. But at the end of the day, I kind of know whether I'm going fast or slow because I'm the one doing the slide hopping. Over here in game, we have gameplay privacy. Now, as a streamer, I do take advantage of my anonymous mode, but I do not take advantage of streamer mode. All it does is randomize some names in the lobby, but it's pretty easy, especially in the Sydney servers, to find what server I'm on late at night. So I keep that off, but I do keep my anonymous mode on until my endgame message says use code Z. Because it should be the only code you're using when you're buying KR. Code Z. ZED. I don't actually know what game title does, and if you do, let me know in the description below, because the people I've asked don't know what to say. I don't know what it is. I put mine as stinky. I have not seen stinky as a word pop up literally anywhere. Mess around with it and let me know in the comments. I typically have all 3 badges. You know, I am verified. I buy premium most of the time, and I am a Krunker partner. Again, code Z. But I do turn them off because I do tend to find either I get asked a lot, like, what do those badges mean, or I get targeted a lot. Field of view, if you've never messed with field of view, is very important to play around with. If you have a look at mine right now, I'm at 120, so I'm seeing quite a lot of things. What we're going to base it off is on my far right. You can see I'm just looking at that line of the wall there. Now, if we mess around with my FOV, put that down to 90, see that whole section has disappeared. I have to turn to my right now in order to see it. If we go even further down to something like 70, the entire second section of that wall, so right there, has also disappeared. So a high FOV allows you to see more of the game. It can cause some FPS reduction because you're seeing more things, so you're having to render more things, your computer's thinking harder, you're getting less frames. From a competitive point of view, if you can spare the FPS, I find it smarter to go to 120. Now, I've got my weapon bobbing and leaning off. That means when I'm hopping around the map, My weapon does not move. Now, typically, if I were to play a competitive round, I wouldn't use a skin like heyimzed. I'd use something very neutral. That way, I've got less distractions on screen. I'm not kind of having my eye drawn to the moving, flashy object. I'm waiting to see movement from my enemy. Down further, we have something else that is very important. Your ADS FOV power. A lot of people recommend to put this down as low as possible, something like 0.1. What you'll see there is that I'm not zooming in as much. We go back and have a little comparison here. Here is ADS FOV power to 0. No difference. But if we put it back all the way up to 1, you'll see I zoom in. I get a closer look at things. So play around with it and see what you like. It can be a competitive advantage if it fits you. I keep it at 1, but I do like to experiment and put it down to 0.5 sometimes if I'm having a really good day where I'm zipping around the map. Besides that, you've got your hide weapon on ADS, which I'm a big fan of. Basically, when you look down your sights on anything other than a scoped weapon, the gun itself will appear on your screen. That gun can take up quite a bit of screen real estate. If you have a look at my SMG here, when I zoom in, it is completely gone. I get a full screen and I'm able to aim at whatever I want to without having any screen real estate compromised. Something goes below me, nothing is stopping me from seeing it. But if we turn hide weapon on ADS off, you will see the gun takes up my screen. Now, I'm lucky I've got a skin such as heyimzed, which is basically see-through, but my arm also presents a solid object there. I cannot see through my arm. So if I was trying to shoot someone coming down or hopping over someone, that's a lot of screen real estate I'm missing. Rounded arms, they're pretty cursed. I'm not a big fan of rounded arms. They just make your arms look like noodles. Next up, we have customization. Now, this is a big one here, load mods. This allows you to have the option to load mods from the mod screen on the left side there. The only mod I recommend you to download to change your FPS would be the Crucial mod. What it does is it changes the textures in your round. So see these textures here that have little splotches around them, or this crate that has a plank going across and 4 planks at the back. Crucial will turn those into smooth textures, so there aren't any splotches, there aren't any planks. It is just a smooth, one color object. Other than that, let's have a look at scope borders, which is a pretty big one here. Scope borders is one that takes up a lot of screen real estate. If you use the default scope border, it looks like this. You're zoomed in, you've got tunnel vision, you can only see a small part of the map. It's pretty ugly to look at as well. However, if we want to get a little bit competitive here, if we want to see more of what's around us so that we're not missing people who would have been in that scope border blackness there, all we have to do is come into here and turn scope borders off, or go into your customize section. Make sure you've got your class selected as sniper and go to the scope option down here. Me personally, I have a custom scope, which you'll be able to get from my Twitch channel as well. Here's the difference between the original scope border, which is the default setting, and the custom scope border. Now, something that will impact your FPS massively if you play around with it is this little section here. The ammo, the kills, the deaths, the streak. I see a lot of people who want to personalize their Krunker, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you use an animated image in Krunker, what you're doing is you're forcing your computer to not only render the gameplay, but render these little cute GIFs up the top right that is taking up your FPS. I have seen my FPS drop from a whopping 60 to 100 FPS because I've used too high res of an image. The only thing here in the sound section that I think you need to play around with is the ambient sound. When playing Krunker, you can hear shots or footsteps or slide hops from afar if you listen carefully enough. If you turn on your ambient volume, however, you're gonna start to get some pretty muddy ears. Have a listen to what it sounds like without ambient volume right now. It's quiet, pitch quiet. You can't hear anything. So if someone were hopping around or shooting, you'd be able to hear them pretty easy. But if we turn ambient volume up to 1, there are bells going off. There are birds chirping. There's a wind breeze coming through as well. And depending on the map, those sounds can change too. I find the less noise pollution I have, the better I concentrate on what's at hand. The only other thing here in the sounds section that you might want to play around with is the voice volume setting. This allows you to hear other people talking over their microphones in a Krunker lobby, whether it's customs or pubs. If you're someone who can be triggered easily, or you just don't want to hear any bad words being said, I would turn that off. So if I were you, I would turn it off if that kind of stuff is going to bother you. But if you're in a private custom or you're in a lobby with your friends, turn it on so you guys can chat over Krunker's very crisp, clean bitrate quality. And finally, the last tab, client. In this tab, I would encourage you to have your unlimited FPS on. Game capture as well. That's another one. Even if you're not streaming, and with the setup I have, I actually don't need to have game capture on. If you're streaming from one PC, you need game capture to be on so that you can actually capture the game to send to your stream software. When I don't have game capture on, I find I lose up to half my FPS at times for whatever crazy reason. I get little lag spikes, everything. So play around with it. It might not work for you, it might work for you. It's going to come down to, I think, hardware in this instance. Experimental features I keep off. Anything experimental has a high chance of messing up your FPS. Keep it off until they know it works and I've got it in the game. And accelerated canvas I have on. All it does is change how your game renders. I believe it changes it to the GPU rendering system rather than rendering through your CPU. Other than that, everything else I keep as Krunker gives to me. My angle graphics is default, my color profile is default, my Discord is off, but my resource swapper is on. That's only going to be useful if you do use your own custom mods that you don't load through the mod menu, and especially used for people who make their own textures or mod packs, so you can test it before you send it into the Krunker Nether. And there we have it. Those are all the settings to look at in Krunker. I've gone through and explained what each one can do for you. Let me know what other questions you might have about your Krunker settings and how I can help you get the best performance from your game. One of the things I wanted to talk about real quick is the potential to start streaming Krunker for yourselves. If this is something you would like me to delve into, how to start streaming either for Krunker or other games, let me know. It's something I have a lot of experience in. I've been around Twitch for about 8 years now, and I've been streaming from my heyimzed account for 2 years, and I'm a Twitch partner, so I know a thing or two about what I'm talking about, and I've been around Krunker for a long time, and done a lot of big events on Twitch with Krunker. So let me know in the comments below whether you want me to give you an instructional on how to start streaming for Krunker, and how to make sure you're getting the best kind of quality you can for your stream. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It lets you know when the next video comes out. So if there is another informative tutorial, you will not miss it. Anyway, guys, thanks again, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!